Okay, we are going to talk about the non-departmental fund that the county has, or non-departmental department, I guess you would call it, within the general fund.
But it's not a department.
It's not a department. Non-departmental accounts for revenues and expenditures that aren't attributable to other organizations within the general fund, as well as accounting for the operating transfers that support the functions of other departments. So we also put contingency and reserves for the general fund within this budgetary unit. Our three-year trend, as illustrated here in the bar graph, in 2016-17, we had revenues of $213,842,000 against actual expenditures of $114,727,000. Remember that this is a unit that moves money around to departments, and so some of these numbers may shift from year to year. In the current budget, we have expected revenues of $217.5 million against budgeted expenditures of $204,700,000. And for the budget we're proposing, it's $206.7 million in revenues against $191.516 million in expenditures. As we move forward with the slides, I will illustrate a little bit more about what constitutes the dollars that are located within the general fund non-departmental function. You can see that on the revenue side, we maintain about 35% of that amount in fund balance. We have taxes that provide 62% of the incoming revenues. We have some federal dollars that come into this particular budgetary unit, but not many. Mostly those are smaller and declining each year. They have been things like timber taxes, timber proceeds. Charges for services are virtually none, and we get some state monies, and that I think includes, are we putting the marijuana dollars into the? Yeah, the new shared revenues are all going into this departmental unit. The largest drain on the non-departmental is interfund transfers, and those are done in support of operations of all functions that the county does, with some exceptions, but we support a lot of other departmental operations with interfund transfers out of the general fund and into other funds. We have reserves and contingency that's set aside in the budget, accounts for 15% of that total amount. We have cost allocation charges that come to the non-departmental group. That's basically for things that, let's give an example. In this building, we have some vacant space that in the last couple of years has, the rent for that vacant space, I believe, has come from the non-departmental group and paid for just the allocated costs and the rent for this space because it was unoccupied. And we're about to have an opening on our within this building again, but we have high demand now for that space, and so we expect to fill that with departmental needs. Materials and service costs only 3%. Personal services are less than 1%. And special payments, mostly to local governments, constitute 22%. Correct? For the radios. There we go. And that's the dollars that came in on the voter-approved bond. We call that special payments. Significant issues and trends. We are a provider in non-departmental, not a recipient of general fund support. So we are sending money out of the general fund toward other funds. The major source of new revenue is our property tax influx, which is expected to grow approximately 4.8% per year for the foreseeable future. And that's based on our own estimates, and we try to make those jive with the estimates of the assessor and tax collector. We're getting some increase in state revenue due to the addition of marijuana tax revenue. We expect over 2 years, $2.6 million starting in this fiscal year. Major expenditures are operating support to departments, and that's going to decrease in the next fiscal year because we're going to be flattening the change in personnel services and allocated costs countywide. As Mr. Krupp mentioned this morning, the change in allocated costs is fairly minimal. Special payments accounts for reimbursements to local governments for the emergency radio systems using proceeds out of our general obligation bonds, which netted us 67 million, I believe. Yes, 67 million. Our contingency is 5% of total net general fund expense budget request per the policy of the board. And the reserve is set at 10% of unrestricted general fund revenue per the policy of the board, plus separate amounts for undispersed general obligation bond premium and allowance for future jail beds, which is mentioned as a budgetary element this morning by Mr. Krupp. And I think that leads me to the question period. There's really not too much change in this unit and not too much excitement, I would say. Do we have any questions?
Seeing no questions, sir, would you like to discuss?